division, because some of them there were arguing this way and that way. But if you look at this in verse 4, it says, and while one saith, I am of Paul, and another saith, I am of Apollos, are you not carnal? In other words, he said, you all are making a big mistake. One of you are saying that you're of Paul and the others of Apollos, but that's being a carnal Christian, because that's not what's important. That's not who they need to be looking at. It's kind of like the fellow that I read about one time that was a big preacher up in Chicago, and I know I've told you this about it before, but he walked by a gutter or just like a gully there. There's a man laying down that gully. And he looked up at him and he said, you saved me. And he looked down at him and said, you look like something I'd save, right? Because that's what Paul wanted to emphasize. It doesn't matter. And you know, that gets to be a problem sometimes, because people get so attached to this, that, the other, that they forget the real reason. Now look what Paul said about this in verse 5. He said, who then is Paul and who is Apollos? What are they? But ministers by whom you believed, even as the Lord give every man. What he said is, what are we? We're nothing more than ministers. We're nothing more than if you look at that word and you look at some of the things, the meanings in different ways it's used, it basically means we're nothing more than servants. We're nothing more than that. We're not this great thing you talk about. And that's what gets some people sometimes in the ministry and different things like that. They get so involved in self that they forget where the power comes from. And they forget who they are. And people get to looking at people, just like I heard something the other day. It's very disturbing, but because I actually had listened to the person before and liked him, but I bet that church has exploded all to pieces. A big church, and this guy had to get up and he made an admission and stepped down from the ministry. I'll guarantee that church has fell off to nothing, because they had so much faith in him that they forgot who the one they need to have faith in. So here's what he's basically saying, is that you do not need to look at us, because we are nothing but servants of the Most High God. That's what we are. We're here to tell you about this, but it's not us. It'd be no different than trying to build a movement around something that doesn't work. But if you think about it, Paul and Apollos were nothing more than waiters and servants. People that wait on tables and we could call them bus boys, I guess. Now, when you get to think about that, you're saying, well, you're letting off like they ain't nothing. No, they were great men of God, but you have to understand that's all they were. They were just a busboy, a servant, a waiter that done the work that's supposed to be done. You ever seen any monuments built to a busboy or to a waiter? Yeah, that don't happen. Why? Because people don't think they're worthy of that. But Paul and Apollos were great men, and you can read about Apollos, what a great orator he was, and how elegant he spoke and things like that. But you have to understand, it does not matter what you think of yourself. You need to understand that you are a sinner saved by the grace of God. When you think of that, doesn't that bring you back down to earth? Because I'll tell you what, I've been around a little while, Trevor. I've seen a lot of people fly pretty high, but then they forget whose wings are on. And then when they get off, they fall right on their face, right? So you need to understand that's what he's telling them. You folks are making a bad mistake. You're not doing this. It'd be no different than somebody that trying to make themselves more than that. And that's what people want to do. But Paul came back and he said, we are just the ministers whom you believed, ministers by whom you believed. Connor, he was just saying, listen, I don't do anything. I just told you about Jesus. I just gave you the word. I can't save you. And a lot of people try to do that, like I was talking about there. A lot of people try to do that, but that just don't work that way, because it comes through Jesus Christ and the power of God. That's what it amounts to, because we're nothing but bondservants and slaves. He put that in there so many times, you just find it over and over again. And it's so important. I don't think anybody here has that attitude, but I've been around people, and you have too, right? They think they are absolutely it. Well, I just don't know what it is. Do you? Well, if you were on the Adams family, I know what it is. Everybody know it? Yeah, everybody knows who it was. I don't know what he looked like, but he sure didn't know what he really looked like. He just looked like a big bunch of hair to me. So that's the way some of those folks are when they look themselves. But Paul said, we are nothing But bond servants. Now, men will try to honor man, right? Because that is the highest they know. But that's not anything. We know the Lord of Lords, the King of Kings. We know the Creator, the one that done everything. It'd be kind of like this. If you had an artist that was a great artist, and Gordon, you wanted to build a monument to this great artist, who would you build it to, him or the paintbrush? Think about that. I hope you'd build it to him, because a paintbrush is what? It's just a tool in the master's hand. And if we are anything for God, that's what we are, is a tool in the master's hand. And we'll find out some things about that a little later that'll help us. Now, Paul in verse 6, look what he says. He said, I have planted and Apollos watered. Surely those are good things, aren't they? But is one more important than the other? Paul was saying, I may have planted, Apollos watered, but look what happened. He said, but God gave the increase. We can do the work when we put out a garden. Don't we put a seed in the ground? And don't we, if it needs water like now, we'll water it? But do you do anything to really make that thing grow? You can't make it grow if it ain't right, right? It won't do nothing. It'll just lay there. Like some seeds we put out. What'd you put out, Kay? And ain't none of them wanting to come up. Squash. Them squash has been squashed. They won't come up. And I'm afraid today that a lot of people are planting and watering and pulling them out and trying to make something that's not there. They're trying to make things out of it won't work. We have to do our part, and then God does the hard work. That's the thing about this. He just said, listen, I planted seeds and Apollos watered, and we worked this thing, but it's God that gave the increase. And whenever I do this all the time, and I try to, and I really mean this. It's not just something I say. They'll say, I've had people could drive by the church here, and they'll say, boy, you're doing a good job up there. You've really, I said, if they ever get a pastor up there, there ain't no telling what they'll be able to do, right? I said, if anything's happening at Valley Grove Church, it's because of God, not by me, because I can't do anything other than just do what little I know to do. But God gives the increase because He knows what we need, and He'll help us in any facet of life when we get like that. You know, if you study, I'm going to get on that in just a minute. If you study and pray about stuff, I believe God will give you an increase in that. I believe He'll give you understanding you never thought of. Because I know myself down through time, and I hope you've done it a little bit. I've read stuff, just like David and I talked to her just a second ago. That message I preached this Sunday, I've been all over that thing couldn't tell you how many times I've been over. But for this message this Sunday, I saw it in a whole different light. Now, why is that? I've been over it before. Because when you water, you plant, you do the things He do, God will give you the increase. You believe that tonight? I believe He helps us in all those things, because it's impossible to do things, or you can try to do it on your own, but it's a whole lot better when you let God do the work. It's a whole lot better. See, we need to remember our pay scales. You know, people say, well, that's above my pay scale, right? Have you ever heard somebody say, we try to do a lot of things that's above our pay scale. And we mess up when we try to do that, right? So we need to understand, God didn't ask us to do everything. He just asked us to do what He wants us to do, which I've got something to say about that. But He used two agricultural metaphors, if you want to have that way about this. But there's a whole lot more functions than just two in a church. A whole lot more functions than just two in a church. Because when we think of that, you know, He mentioned those two types of ministries, but the principle applies to every single person that's here tonight and every single person that's a saved Christian. I believe, and I have said this all my entire life and heard it all my life, that I've been in the ministry, that everybody has a function. Everybody has a function. Do you believe that? I do. Some of you have functions that you don't even know about. Some of you just do things you don't even know, you don't even believe you're doing anything. But you are. You know, there's people here that probably I never don't see this, that, the other, but you have a function. And a lot of that is just being a witness for God because you're here tonight. Or that you go out and you're who you are. So everybody has a function and everybody has to do the things they need to do. But we as God's people sometimes we think, well, that's a greater function than I've got. You ever do that? Say, well, they can sing. I wish I could do that. That's a greater function. Or he preaches. I wish I could do that. That's a greater function. Let me tell you something. If God has called you to give you something to do, that is the most important thing you can do, right? It's not about that, because it's not a glamorous situation. It's not about this, that, the other, because I may do this, just like tonight. I'm doing this. Mark led singing. We had people playing music. We had other people singing. We had you here making good conversation. And Johnny said he's going to keep his mouth shut, right? Ain't that what you said there a while ago? But that we want people to be able to do what they need to do. And sometimes, I'll just be honest with you, you don't know this, but sometimes you all are such a support to me just because you come out. Well, I don't do nothing, sit there. Thank you. This side over here, I can't do a thing with. I could preach to this bunch right here all day long, and there won't be nothing happen, right? Oh, I forgot about that. Well, my point is made, right? So, but when there's people here, you have something to try to do, and you can do your job, right? And you all are such a big help. I want you to know that. And don't think that just because you don't say this or you don't do that, just think all the things that we do that nobody even sees. Some of you work in a card ministry, you do the mailing, some of you do this, that, the other, and some of you are just willing to help it. Whatever your ministry is, understand it is important. All the work that God gives us is important work. You're important in the plan that God has for Valley Grove Baptist Church. You're important. Why? Because He placed you here. So many of you have chosen to come this way, and everybody that's a member has chosen to be a member, and I believe that God can take whatever you do and you do it the very best you can. And you'll be, as we'll talk about here in a minute, you'll be rewarded for that. Because it is just so magnificent when people do what they ought to do. I've said this to somebody just recently. They were talking about the church here, and I said, we have a lot of people that do a lot of things. And they won't, and they don't, it just works wonderfully. And I hope you always keep understanding. Just because you're not this, that, the other, it's just like that Paul wrote about in one section there. You talk about, parts of the body and stuff like that. Well, yeah, maybe your eyes, everybody want to be an eye, right? Pretty good thing. Wouldn't help us all with all eyes, would it? Everybody want to have an ear, be an ear, that'd be pretty nice. But it wouldn't help us with all that ears. Because all you have to do, if somebody asks you about walking, you wouldn't think a thing about one little digit you have on your foot. You'd think that's the most insignificant one there is. But I've heard people talk about having that toe cut off. It makes you can't walk hardly without that little toe, right? So the church can't walk without everybody doing what they need to do, right? So I guess my thought on this, I'm not preaching on anybody to do this. I'm just saying, whatever you do, don't worry that it may not be to the world a glamorous position. Just understand that if God's called you to do that, it is very, very important. And some of you all do such a good job, and everybody does as far as I know, but you just keep doing the things you need to do, and God will bless you for that, because that's what it talks about. And it's to a person, you just do that, because like I've said many times, ministry is nothing more than helping. That's all it is. That's all it is. Ministry is helping. And in this world today, we need people that want to help, right? Because that ain't the way it's supposed to work. The United States of America has changed so much in my lifetime, and it'll change even more. To have compassion is looked on as weakness. To want to lift people up, that ain't the way you get ahead. You get ahead by stepping on them. You get ahead by pushing them down so you can climb up the ladder that way. But I'm going to tell you, whatever we do for God, He knows, and He gives us the rewards for doing that. Now, those may be different with different people, but we don't need some of the things that people need. You know, I have, in my lifetime, you may have done it too, I've got things there at the house. I've thrown away a lot of them, but I've still got some. I had this plaque one time, David, that I got. And when they gave it to me, didn't know even why I got it. But so what I did, I thought was so insignificant that you couldn't even get it. And they gave me one time talking about what a good job I done. And I thought, I only did good because the rest of my never done nothing, right? I mean, but I did more than anybody else, but I still didn't do anything because it didn't matter. But some of those things, they don't matter to me because they ain't worth anything except just right there. I'll tell you something about being in sales you might not know. Some of you have been in, Mark's been in a little bit, Connor's in it now. Funny thing about sales, they have these rah-rah sessions at the end of the year and bring everybody together, and they'll call your name, and most of them are mad as the devil because they didn't get it right. And then after lunchtime, they come back and say, well, all that's pretty good, but what are you going to do next year? Well, it lasted a long time, didn't it? Do you think I'm telling you a story? That's exactly what happens. So, exactly. What are you going to do next year? Well, you just got through this year, but you need to already have next year planned. You can't ever win on stuff like that. But God gives you something that will help you through everything. And when we're doing what we need to do and understand it's very important, we'll never have this problem. Jealousy, envy, and strife. So many people, and I'm sure some of you have been there. I have. And it's not fun. When you have jealousy between different things. Ever been a place where people are jealous of everybody? If one sung, the other didn't have to sing because they jealous of each other. And one preacher's afraid the other's going to preach better than him. Goodness gracious. We're all useful. I've thought this many times. I preach, and I'm just going to, because he's a friend of mine, and I'm sorry he's gone on, but that's just like, every preacher I know, and if I pick, just pick, we got two here, and we all preach a little different. Chipper and I preach different, but we were working for the same goal. And there was people that he could touch that I couldn't touch, and there's people I could touch, he could. So if we all understand that, it's not a competition. Because if you look at it that way, you'll always be disappointed, and the devil will have you beat all the time. But God does not fail to recognize his servants. And he will help you. And the reward, now listen to this now. Here's something we do that's totally wrong. Our rewards that God gives us are not based on what we think it is. God's reward is based on you doing the very best that you can do with what you've got. It's not based on the result. You say, that don't make sense. It's not based on the results. Would you think, if I ask you a question, who would you think, now I'm going to ask you this question. If I ask you, David, teacher, he knows, he's got this. If I ask you to pick who was the most, which Old Testament, well, maybe I need to get Mark's Old Testament, but anyway. If you were looking at the Old Testament and I gave you two choices, Jeremiah or Jonah, who was the more faithful? Jeremiah, right? Jeremiah loved the Lord. Jeremiah loved his people. Jeremiah cried over his people. And it wasn't because he was peeling onions. I told a woman that one time. She told everybody, said, that crazy preacher up there told me it's because she asked me. I couldn't help it. I couldn't help it. They just come over me. She was so serious. Why do they call Jeremiah the crying preacher? Never thought about it a second. Said he was peeling onions at the time. So anyway, but he cried over his people. He wanted them to listen, but they would not listen. Right? They wouldn't listen at all. They didn't do anything. But he wanted them to listen. But what about Jonah? Jonah was not a very nice person. Jonah cared less about them people than anybody. He didn't care. He didn't want them to repent. Jeremiah worked he worked a lot of years, a good number of years, and got no results except hated and ridiculed and mocked and everything else. But he still went on for the Lord. Was he faithful in his service? Yes, he was. Did he have a lot of people that come and got saved and people changed, if we use that way? No, he had very little to show for that. Now here's Jonah, who didn't even want to do it, goes through the city one time and the whole city repents. But both of them, Jeremiah was rewarded for his stuff. Don't get in that numbers game. It don't matter. We do the best we can. If I got in that numbers game, I'd be looking around saying, well, this happens over here and that happens over there. I ain't doing anything at all. But God has a work for us to do. And when we do that and we do it the best we can, that's all he requires of us. Results we can't make happen. And I'm not going to do this. Like I heard a fellow one time wanted to impress people. So tell them how good the Sunday school class was growing. How many attendance was growing? He'd go outside before Sunday school's over and count everybody in the parking lot. What does that matter? I know we're in an association. I'm not in competition with any of them. Because we have our own situation, and if we do the best we can, that's all that matters. People say, well, that don't make sense. You ought to want to. Do I want people to be saved? You bet I do. Do I want people to grow and us to be a powerful church? You bet I do. And we are with what we do. But I can't make none of that happen. All I can do is plant, water, but it takes God giving the increase. And when you do that, I'm going to tell you, you'll be the best you can be. And that's all he wants us to be, is just to try and do the very best we can. And understand that none of us are going to be able to do things right. I know one of the worst things I do, and I'm pretty self-conscious about stuff. I don't know if you know that or not, but I like to do things. I sometimes know that David don't do it, but Judy sometimes has to look at that stuff that I give him sometimes. She said, goodness gracious, where'd he go to school? He can't spell. He spells it wrong. And I even got a speller check and still get them wrong sometimes. But that's why they do that, so they can check me out, make sure I spelled everything right. And then Judy checks, makes sure David's got his punctuation right? So anyway, but we have to understand we all have limitations, but do the best you can. Would you do that? And I think we'll be good. And I know that when everybody does what they're supposed to do and not worry about whether they could do something better than somebody else, that gets you in trouble every time. Now, we all want to do the best we can. That's what I said. The best we can. It's just like whether you're a minister or whatever, you ought to want to do the very best you can every time you stand to preach for the Lord. Because it's an opportunity. If you sing, you ought to want to sing the best. Whatever that you do. But we all need to understand we have limitations. So you do what you do and do it the best you can, and you'll be blessed by that. You believe that tonight? I hope you do, because it's the truth. Because it's not about the results as much as it is a willing worker that'll do the things that God asked him to do. And that's what he's telling me here. He said, don't worry, don't put that in there, because it goes on to say, so neither is he that planteth anything, neither is he that watereth, but it's God that giveth the increase. Now he that planteth and he that watereth are one, and every man shall receive his own reward. We ought to be one body, right? Working for the same goal. And if we are, we get stuff done, and that's what's happened here, because we've seen good things happen, and he beats me up all the time for saying that, but we've seen good things happen. We've seen a few people saved, got to baptize a few, seen a lot come and unite with a church that's helped us out, so we're tickled with that. And I don't know what God's got in the future for us all, and don't know, what none of us do, because life is short and things change. But while we're working together, let's work and do the best we can. That sound like a good deal? let God tell you what to do. And when he gives you something to do, it's just like, I know Agnes has been here 60-something years, and she's probably heard that said 1,000,000 times. But it's just as true the first time it said as it is this time. You do the best you can, and you'll be blessed. Mark, come get you a song. Let's stand and sing tonight.
Page 361. Page 361. At the bottom.
Thank you for all you do. Thank you, Susan, for what you do. Appreciate you. Thank you for your work. Thank you for yours. David, appreciate you. Don't laugh now. Thank you for what you do. Appreciate you, girl. Appreciate you. Appreciate you, sir, for what you do. You too, Robin. Appreciate what you ladies do. Appreciate your help, Denny. Appreciate what you do, young man. You too. Dear Jesus, come. Amen. And I do want to say this. We need to understand, and if we can get our mindset this way, it makes it a whole lot better. Remember, when we're in the work of the Lord, it's not that we have to do it, it's that we get to do it. Makes all the difference in the world. It's just like I did something for somebody back there, and they said, well, you didn't have to do that. And I said, if you'd been trying to make me do it, I wouldn't have done it. I done it because I wanted to do it, and that's the way we ought to work for the Lord. We do it because He's done so much for us, and it's a privilege to get to do something for the Lord. You might have a word tonight. If not, I hope you take this week, and if you have the opportunity to do something for the Lord that'll maybe help somebody, I hope you'll do that and be a witness this week to someone. Anything else? Yeah, I texted Ronnie and told him. I forgot. I didn't know about Carol, but nobody told me on hers. But I did know about Ronnie's, and I just forgot about it. He said it wasn't no big deal, but we'll make sure we get him next week if he's here. So we get Carol tonight. We appreciate Carol, and like I said, so many times people think they're not important, but you're important in the work of the Lord. Go right ahead.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.